Hi everyone, I'm Ivanka Trump and thanks for tuning in for our Facebook Live series. So this is from our hashtag Ask Ivanka series, and I thought it would be fun to do this live via Facebook. So I am taking your questions. So please comment, give me any questions you want. This is intended to be for first-time managers. So I asked on my own Facebook page last week, what are some of the questions you as a first-time manager would want to know as you're going through the process of team building and interviewing and ultimately hiring talent. So these are some of the questions that came in, but throw more at me and I'll try and get to as many as I can over the course of this. So the first question that I have on team building and how to make a good hire as a first-time manager is, what advice would you give someone who's never conducted an interview before? So it's actually kind of intimidating to be the interviewer if you've never conducted an interview. And obviously the person sitting across from you feels like they squarely own the intimidated factor, given that they're the ones with something on the line and seeking a job. But I remember going through the process of hiring the first few people on my team, and it's a little bit nerve-wracking. So I think just like anything else, preparation is really helpful. So I would spend some time thinking about, first of all, what are the strengths and what are the requisite skill sets that you feel a person needs in order to excel at that role. And then you sort of interview for those things and you look specifically for those things. Also, it's really helpful to write a little cheat sheet of questions, things that you really would want to know the answer to, both in terms of their professional history, but also in terms of personal components that you're wondering if they'd be a good cultural fit within the organization. So I used to always have a little cheat sheet. I've spent some time prior to the interview jotting down notes of questions that I'd really like to hear that person articulate on more. And also then areas that were a source of excitement for you or concern for you on the resume. So if you see somebody who's jumped around a lot and occupied many different positions across many different fields over a short period of time, I would definitely hone in on that and ask about that and try and get further detail.
Okay, we just got a question on Facebook from Deborah Wendt. How do you stay calm under pressure?
How do you stay calm under pressure? So one of my favorite quotes, and I actually don't know exactly how the quote goes, but it's an analogy to somebody being cool and being like a duck, unruffled on the top and on the surface of the water, but their feet are kicking like mad underneath. So I like to sort of think in that context. For me, it's about being prepared. I always feel very nervous going into a meaningful negotiation if I haven't put the time in, or at least a little bit more nervous. So I think preparation is critical. If you're giving a presentation especially, not worrying about sort of the sequence, not worrying about the flow, if you have a PowerPoint or some sort of visual aid, really feeling like those things are not something you're sort of experiencing real time as you're in the process of giving the presentation. But, I think also just putting things into context and taking a deep breath. It sounds really simple, but the thing we shouldn't be doing before a nerve-wracking interview, for example, is sitting in the waiting room hunched over our iPhone and typing messages. We should stop, put everything down, have our resume, be ready, but also take a deep breath. And I think sometimes just relaxing for a second, breathing, and sort of being in the right positive mindset can be really helpful in terms of preparing yourself mentally and also physiologically for a challenge that is approaching.
Great. We've gotten another one asking about your point of view on phone interviews.
Ooh, phone interviews. I hate them. I think Skype is a little bit better because at least you can ensure, you sort of get a sense of the person a bit better. You want to see how somebody carries themselves, how they present themselves. Are they dressed nicely? Are they dressed slovenly? So I think presentation is important when you're when you're interviewing someone. I think also you have to factor in. I think also you have to be realistic about the fact that when you are interviewing with somebody who's very busy, telephonically, there is a good chance that they're distracted and answering emails during your questions. Now, somebody shouldn't be doing that. That's a bad use of the interviewer's time to not be fully focused on assessing the qualities of the person they're interviewing. But sometimes interviewing is a bit of a chore, and you want that person to give you their full attention. So I don't like interviewing via phone, and I only do it if the person is located so remotely that it's cost prohibitive for them to come in and do it for me.
Great.
We have another one.
We do. What makes a resume stand out to you?
Ooh. So I think there's good and bad standing out as it pertains to a resume. I think, obviously, I think the good is showing some personality. I always look, I go quite quickly, especially to somebody who has very limited experience, somebody who's young and just out of school. I like to see what their interests are and to see sort of a diversity of experience and interest. If they speak foreign languages, if they're proficient at coding, if they love art history. So I think all of those things and all of that, that sort of personality, it's a great thing to allow to shine through in the form of resume. I would be careful about being too cute and being too expressive unless you're applying for a very creative position. In terms of your resume, it should look polished, should look put together. No typos. I see typos so often, or sentences with poor grammar. That's an immediate turnoff. But I think that a resume is very important because it ultimately has the ability to get your foot in the door and enable a subsequent interview. So take it seriously. We actually have on our website, IvankaTrump.com, we created some awesome resume templates for various types of job positions, and people have really loved that content. So start with that and go from there.
We just got a good one on how do you balance being perceived as nice versus being a strong leader when you're doing the interview.
Okay, so being nice versus being a strong leader. Well, I think you can't be something you're not. So if you're not a nice person and you feign it, that's pretty inauthentic. But I think as a leader, I think you want to be a benevolent one. I think you want to inspire your team, and obviously having them respect you doesn't mean they think that you're soft or weak, but I think being kind and thoughtful is important, and I think you get a different level of collaboration and engagement when people feel that you genuinely and authentically care about them and their well-being and see them for more than just the value they add to the company. So I believe 100% in terms of transparency of goals and creating very clearly articulated goals for each member of my team and having very high expectations for people accomplishing those goals. And I don't have a lot of leniency for not accomplishing those goals. That doesn't mean I'm not nice about it, but I think it's much easier to be nice when you've also sort of created clear roles and designations for people that work in a company. Then it's not, there shouldn't be much of a disconnect when people are failing to live up to expectations.
We've got a question about the questions you should ask in the interview. Do you ask personal questions, and if so, which ones?
So I do like to ask personal questions. I think it's less in some ways about the substance of their answer and more about sort of learning about their true personality. So you see when they become happy and engaged and what they thrive on. And I think you get a really good sense of whether or not they'd be a good cultural fit with you and within the context of the company based on those answers. So I think asking those questions is really important. Plus, I think it's a great way to sort of warm people up. What makes them tick? What's the role of family in their lives? What are their hobbies? I think these are really sort of important things to ask of people. And just like, in my company, I encourage people to be multidimensional, and I like hiring people that have interests and have passion and are curious. I think that makes them more dynamic and more effective and better leaders. So I love to see that come through in an interview.
We just got a question asking at what point in the process should you talk about salary?
What point in the process should you talk about salary? Well, it depends. So sometimes the salary is articulated in advance and you see that as part of the job description, in which case you shouldn't be going on the interview if there's an incredible bust in terms of what your expectations are and what the employer is looking to pay. But I think that can be talked about pretty early on in the discussion, because you don't want to waste a lot of time, and you certainly don't want the person who's interviewing you wasting a tremendous amount of time if there's a total misalignment. So I think asking a question early on about the budget they have against that position is very reasonable, and then making an assessment as to whether you want the opportunity enough to deviate from where you are, or whether you think you can push them towards a higher number if that's where you want to be, or you're content with what they're offering for the position. So I don't think there's any problem in asking that and being and doing so early on. And I think that's it. So we have a lot more questions. I want to be doing this longer, but I said I do it for around 10 minutes, and I think based on all the great questions, I will do it a lot more. So I hope you'll tune in the future, and thank you so much. Bye.